A dying alien species suddenly revived, because a single human emotion rewrote their biology. No weapon, no miracle tech, just one broken man who chose to be heard. If you want to know how humanity did the impossible, stay with me. And tell me where you're watching from, subscribe to support the channel, and let's begin the story. The wind cut through Elias Ward like a promise kept too long. He sat at the edge of the Sitka Harbor dock, fingers moving mechanically through torn fishing nets, mending holes that seemed to multiply faster than he could repair them. The afternoon light was wrong, too dim for 3 in the afternoon, like the sky itself was holding its breath. 15 years ago, his father had walked into this same water and never walked out. The ocean had swallowed him whole during a storm that the Weather Service swore wasn't coming. Elias still checked forecasts 3 times a day. Still didn't trust them. The radio on the dock crackled to life. He didn't reach for it. Local news, probably. Another report about rising fish prices or some tourist complaining about the cold. But the words made him pause. Unidentified vessels detected in upper atmosphere. Coast Guard advises all maritime traffic to remain vigilant. Reports suggest possible extraterrestrial origin. Elias tied off a knot and said nothing. The aliens had made contact 2 years ago. Humanity had celebrated. Then came the fear. Then came the rumors. He packed his tools and headed toward the harbor bar, a squat building that smelled like diesel and decades of spilled beer. Inside, voices were already raised. Tom Brackens, a crab fisherman with hands like weathered leather, was holding court at the bar. "I'm telling you, they eat memories," Tom said, voice low and serious. "My cousin down in Juneau, he talked to a guy who talked to a scientist. The Urathi, they're called. 3 meters tall, skin like crystal, and they get inside your head. Take everything you are, and leave you empty." "That's bullshit," someone muttered, but nobody sounded convinced. Elias ordered a beer he wouldn't finish and listened. Sarah Mitchell was there too, sitting 2 stools away, pretending not to notice him. His ex-fiancée. She'd left him 3 years ago with a single sentence that still lived in his chest like a splinter. "You never let me in, Elias. I can't love a closed door." He'd wanted to argue, wanted to explain, but she'd been right, and they both knew it. Tom was still talking. "They're called memory eaters. Don't make eye contact, don't get close. They'll pull your whole life out through your eyes, and you'll never get it back." Sarah looked at Elias then, just for a moment. There was something sad in her expression, something that looked almost like pity. He looked away first. Outside, the sky darkened further. Wrong. All wrong. And then the world shook. Not an earthquake. Something heavier. Something that made the glasses on the bar rattle and the floorboards groan and every person in the room go silent at once. The sound came next. A deep shriek of metal tearing through atmosphere, building and building until it felt like the air itself might split open. Sirens erupted across Sitka. Emergency broadcast alerts screamed from every phone in the bar simultaneously. People scrambled for the door, shouting, panicking. Tom was yelling something about getting to the evacuation point. Elias stayed where he was, beer untouched, listening to the sirens wail and the sky scream, and the memory of his father's last morning playing on repeat in his head. The ocean took what it wanted. Always had. Maybe now the sky would too. He stood slowly, left money on the bar, and walked outside into the wrongness of the afternoon light. Something was coming. Something huge. Something that would change everything. The ship came down like a falling star that forgot how to die. It tore through the clouds, trailing fire and ice, spinning in a way that made Elias's stomach turn just watching it. The impact hit the frozen inlet, a quarter-mile from the harbor, and the sound was like the world cracking open. Ice shattered. Water geysered upward. The shockwave knocked people off their feet. By the time Elias reached the shore, half of Sitka was already there. Armed. Terrified. Phones out, recording, streaming, broadcasting their fear to the world. The Coast Guard was shouting orders nobody was following. Someone had brought a hunting rifle. Several people had. The ship wasn't large, maybe the size of a small house. Hull blackened and split, steam rising from where superheated metal met frozen water, and emerging from the wreckage, moving slowly, painfully, was something that made the crowd collectively step back. She was massive, 3 meters tall, maybe more. Her skin caught the light like crystal, refracting colors that shouldn't exist, blues and silvers and something that looked almost like starlight frozen solid. Her eyes were huge and silver, reflective, showing the crowd their own fear thrown back at them. She moved with a limp, one arm clutched against her torso, breathing hard. Each exhale created clouds of vapor that shimmered before dissolving. "That's a Urathi," someone whispered, and the word spread like a virus. Memory eater, mind thief, monster. The creature stopped moving, raised one massive hand slowly, palm out, fingers spread. A gesture, peace, help, something universal. "She's going to eat our minds. Don't let her touch you. Someone call the military." The crowd surged backward, a wave of panic. Elias found himself pushed forward by the tide of people fleeing. He stumbled, caught himself, and ended up standing alone in the space between the terrified humans and the injured alien. She looked at him, those silver eyes focused, and for a moment Elias felt something, a pressure, a presence, like someone had opened a door in his chest and was listening to what lived inside. Not invasive, just aware. Gently, unbearably aware. She took a step toward him, and the crowd screamed. The alien flinched, stopped, made herself smaller, curling inward, trying to seem less threatening. But there was no way to make 3 meters of crystalline alien seem harmless, especially not when everyone already believed she was a monster. Elias looked back at the crowd, at Tom, who'd brought his hunting rifle, at Sarah, pale and shaking, at dozens of neighbors who'd lived in Sitka their entire lives. Good people, scared people. People who believed the rumors because rumors were all they had. He looked at the alien again, at the way she held her injured arm, at the fear in those reflective eyes. His toolbox was still in his hand. He'd grabbed it automatically when the siren started, the same way his father always had. Tools meant fixing things, and something here was broken. Elias took 3 steps forward. "No!" someone shouted. "Get back!" He kept walking, slowly, hands visible, toolbox lowered. The alien watched him approach, trembling, confused. Nobody had ever done this. Nobody had ever chosen to get closer. Elias stopped a few meters away, close enough to see the cracks in her crystalline skin where blood that looked like liquid mercury seeped through. Close enough to hear the ragged quality of her breathing. Close enough to see that she was as terrified as the crowd behind him. He set down his toolbox, raised his hands, tried to smile. "You're hurt," he said, knowing she probably didn't understand English. "I can help." The alien stared at him, silver eyes wide, processing. And then she made a sound, low and resonant, that somehow conveyed more confusion and surprise than words ever could. Behind him, sirens approached, military vehicles, the Coast Guard, reinforcements. An amplified voice cut through the air. "Civilian, step away from the entity. You have 5 minutes to clear the area before we establish a containment perimeter." The alien looked at the approaching vehicles, at the guns, at the crowd, at Elias. He didn't move. "I can help," he said again, softer this time, and waited to see if kindness was enough of a language for translation. Elias spent 20 minutes arguing with Lieutenant Commander Price, a Coast Guard officer who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. The alien sat motionless on the ice, watching the exchange with those unsettling silver eyes that reflected everything and revealed nothing. "She's injured," Elias kept saying. "Look at her. She's not attacking. She's not doing anything except bleeding and trying not to get shot." "Ward, we don't know what she's capable of," Price replied, hand resting on her sidearm. "Protocol says we contain and assess. That means you back off and let us do our job. Your job is to protect people. She's people. She's an unknown entity from an unknown culture that allegedly feeds on human consciousness. You read the briefs. You know the rumors. Rumors, Elias said flatly. You're going to cage her based on rumors. Price looked tired. Behind her, more military vehicles were arriving, cordoning off the inlet. Satellite trucks, news crews. The circus was setting up, and the alien was the main attraction whether she wanted to be or not. Finally, Price sighed. 24 hours. We're stretched thin with 3 other landing sites reported tonight. I can give you 24 hours to stabilize her. Then she goes to a secure facility for medical assessment and cultural evaluation. That's the best I can do. That's enough, Elias said, though he had no idea if it was. He approached the alien slowly, making his intentions clear. She watched him come, wary but not hostile. Up close, the damage was worse than he'd thought. Cracks spider-webbed across her torso, where the crystalline skin had fractured on impact. The silver blood was cooling into something solid, like mercury freezing in real time. "Can you walk?" he asked. She tilted her head, processing. Then, carefully, she stood. The crowd gasped. 3 meters tall was an abstraction until you stood next to it and realized how completely she could destroy you if she wanted to. She didn't want to. Elias led her away from the inlet, toward the industrial district where his fishing shed stood among a dozen others. The walk took 15 minutes and drew a crowd of followers who kept a careful 50-meter distance, phones out, recording everything. The shed was weathered gray wood and rust-stained metal, packed with nets and buoys and the accumulated debris of a fishing career that had never quite taken off. It smelled like salt and old rope. Elias had spent more hours here than in his apartment. It was the only place that had ever felt like his. He gestured for her to sit. She folded herself down carefully, making herself as small as possible in the limited space. Even sitting, she was enormous. Even trying to be gentle, she was intimidating. Elias filled a bucket with hot water from the utility sink, grabbed clean rags, and set to work. Her skin was hard, but not impenetrable. Warm water made the frozen blood liquefy again, let him wipe away the worst of it. She watched him work with an intensity that made his hands shake slightly. "We don't devour," she said suddenly, and Elias nearly dropped the rag. Her voice was deep and resonant, like cello strings vibrating in a cathedral. The English was perfect, but oddly cadenced, like she was translating as she spoke. "We listen," she continued. "Your kind spread fear. Said we consume consciousness. We do not consume. We hear, we preserve, we honor. But fear is faster than truth. Always." Elias wrung out the rag, searching for words. "What's your name?" "Thaylara." "Elias." He went back to cleaning the wounds. "Why did you come here?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I had nowhere else to go." There was something in the way she said it that resonated in his chest like a struck bell. Lonely recognized lonely. Lost knew lost. The shed door slammed open. Sarah stood framed in the doorway, backlit by the setting sun, face twisted in something between anger and anguish. "Why?" she demanded. "Why her? Why do you save her when you never saved me?" Elias stood slowly, rag still in hand. "Sarah, that's not fair." "Fair?" She laughed, sharp and bitter. "I spent 3 years trying to get you to talk to me. Really talk. About your dad. About your feelings. About anything real. And you just shut down. Shut me out. But her? 1 hour and you're playing hero? She needed help. I needed help. I needed you to let me in." The words hung in the shed air, heavy and true. Elias felt them land, felt them stick. Beside him, Thaylara had gone very still, silver eyes fixed on him with something that looked almost like concern. Sarah shook her head. "Everyone in this town thinks you're crazy or suicidal or under some kind of alien mind control. And maybe they're right." She left. The door swung shut behind her. The silence that followed was enormous. You carry great sadness, Taylara said quietly. I can hear it. Like a song with missing verses. Human pain is very loud. Elias sat down hard on an overturned crate, suddenly exhausted. You can hear emotions? Echoes, resonances. It is how my people communicate truth. Your kind lies with words but cannot lie with feelings. Your sadness is honest. It has been yours for many years. He looked at her, really looked, and saw something he hadn't expected. Understanding. How long have you been lonely? He asked. Thaylara's eyes brightened with something that might have been surprise or might have been tears. Outside, the crowd was growing. Inside, two exiles sat together in the half-light and recognized each other in the silence. Night fell over Sitka like a curtain, and with it came the cold that cut through walls and skin alike. Elias found a space heater that probably violated 6 fire codes and set it up near where Thaylara sat. She didn't seem to need it, but he felt better having something useful to do. He made coffee, offered her some. She looked at the mug with curious confusion, touched it gently with one crystalline finger, then shook her head. My kind do not require sustenance as yours does. We need only connection, emotional resonance. Without it, we fade. You mean you'll die if you're alone? Eventually, yes. She said it simply, factually, like discussing the weather. It is why exile is our deepest punishment. To be cut off from the echo of others is to slowly cease existing. Elias wrapped both hands around his coffee mug, feeling the heat seep into his palms. Is that why you came here? Because you were exiled? That story is long and painful. I do not wish to burden you. I asked. She studied him with those impossible eyes. Outside, voices drifted past the shed. The crowd had thinned, but hadn't disappeared. Someone was taking photographs through the window. Someone else was giving an interview about the memory-eating monster being harbored in a fishing shed. Let them talk. Elias had stopped caring what Sitka thought of him years ago. Who were you? Taylara asked suddenly. Before the sadness? The question hit him like a physical thing. Nobody had ever asked him that. They'd asked how he was doing, if he was okay, whether he needed to talk. But nobody had ever acknowledged that there was a before, that he'd been someone else once. I don't understand, he said, but he did. Your sadness is old, deep. It has roots that reach back many years, but it was not always there. Once you were different. Who was that person? Elias set down the coffee mug before he could drop it. His hands were shaking. Why do you want to know? Because sadness without context is just noise, but sadness with memory becomes story, and stories are sacred. They are how we preserve what matters. Something in his chest cracked. Just a little. Just enough. I was 7, he heard himself saying. Dad took me out on his boat for the first time. Mom was terrified, but Dad said I needed to learn the water. We went out at dawn, just the 2 of us. He taught me how to read the current, how to feel what the ocean was saying. He said fishermen don't control the sea, they listen to it. Learn its moods, respect its power. The words kept coming, spilling out like water through a broken dam. He talked about how proud he'd been to be his father's son, how he'd wanted to be exactly like him, strong, calm, unshakable. He talked about the storm, about how his mother had never recovered, how she'd looked at the ocean every day for 3 years like she was waiting for it to give him back. And then, one morning, she just stopped looking, stopped caring, stopped being his mother in any way that mattered. He talked about Sarah, about how he'd tried to love her the way she deserved but couldn't figure out how, about how he'd felt like there was a wall inside him that he couldn't climb over or tear down, and eventually she'd stopped trying to reach through it. I just stopped, he said finally. Stopped trying to be anything, started going through the motions. Wake up, fix nets, go home, repeat. I thought if I made myself small enough, maybe the ocean wouldn't notice me. Maybe nothing would. Taylara was very still. The shed was silent except for the space heater's electric hum and the wind outside. "Your pain has melody," she said softly. "It is beautiful. It is human. It sings of love and loss and the terrible courage of continuing. Your kind feels so deeply it frightens other species. We Urathi are drawn to human emotion, the way your people are drawn to starlight. It is overwhelming. It is precious." Elias wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, surprised to find them wet. He hadn't cried in 10 years, had forgotten what it felt like. The release, the relief, the terrifying vulnerability of being seen. Outside, someone shouted something about mind control, about the alien getting inside his head. Elias laughed, sharp and bitter. They thought she was manipulating him. They couldn't understand that she was just listening, really truly listening in a way no one had in longer than he could remember. A car pulled up outside. Engine cut. Door opened and closed. Footsteps approached. Elias tensed, but it was just Dr. Miyuki Chen, Sitka's only general practitioner, carrying a medical bag and looking both curious and cautious. "I heard you might need help," she said, eyeing Thaylara with professional assessment. "I've never treated an alien before, but biology is biology. Mind if I take a look?" "Please," Thaylara said. While Miyuki examined the crystalline wounds with careful precision, Thaylara turned back to Elias. "May I ask you something that might seem strange?" "Everything about tonight is strange. May I listen to your memories? Not take them, not consume them? Just hear them properly the way my people do. With your permission. Only with your permission." Elias looked at her. At Miyuki, who'd paused mid-examination to stare. At the window where shadows of the crowd still lingered. "Why would you want to?" "Because no one else has," Thaylara said simply. "And because your memories do not want to disappear. They want to be heard. I hear them calling even now. Loud, desperate, beautiful." Miyuki cleared her throat. "Elias, you don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with." But he was comfortable. For the first time in years, someone was asking permission instead of demanding walls come down. Someone was offering to listen instead of trying to fix. Someone saw value in the broken pieces of who he'd been. "Yes," he said. "Listen. Really listen." Thaylara's eyes brightened like stars coming out at dusk, and Elias felt something in him shift. A door he'd thought was sealed forever began, slowly, to open. Thaylara moved slowly, giving Elias time to change his mind. She extended one hand, fingers spread, crystalline surface catching the shed's dim light and scattering it into colors that had no names. "This will not hurt," she said. "You will feel pressure, warmth, a sense of being heard in a way language cannot achieve. If you want to stop, say so. I will respect your boundary." Miyuki had stepped back, medical bag forgotten, phone out and recording. "For science," she'd said. "For documentation." Really, Elias suspected, because nobody would believe this without proof. "I'm ready," Elias said, and realized he meant it. Thaylara touched his forehead with 2 fingers. The contact was cool at first, then warm, then something beyond temperature. It was like sound translated into sensation, like music he could feel instead of hear. The shed seemed to fall away. The cold vanished. The noise of the crowd outside faded to nothing. And then he was 7 years old again, standing on his father's boat, dawn breaking over the water like something being born. The memory was more vivid than it had ever been, sharp and clear and alive. He could smell the salt air, feel the deck rocking under his feet, hear his father's laugh, deep and genuine, the sound of someone who loved what they did and who they did it with. The memory shifted. He was 17, watching his mother stare at the ocean like she was waiting for it to apologize. 22, proposing to Sarah with a ring he'd saved 8 months to afford. 26, standing at her door after she'd left, wanting to knock and not knowing how. Each memory carried weight, emotion. the fullness of what it had meant to live those moments. And through it all he felt Thylara's presence, not intrusive but witnessing, holding space, listening the way a cathedral listens to prayer. Then something changed. The warmth became heat, the pressure became presence. The air in the shed began to shimmer, and Elias opened his eyes to see light bending around Thylara, like she was a gravitational well pulling reality toward her. Her skin blazed with colors that hurt to look at. Her eyes were white silver suns. "Oh my God," Miyuki whispered, backing toward the door. Thylara pulled her hand away quickly, but the effect continued. Objects in the shed began to levitate, rising slowly into the air. Nets, tools, the coffee mug, everything weightless, everything suspended in a field of energy that crackled with power that was protective rather than destructive, gentle rather than violent. Outside, someone screamed. More voices joined. Phones were out. Everyone was recording. The crowd that had thinned was reforming, growing, spreading the word that something was happening, something impossible, something terrifying. "She's doing it!" Tom Bracken's voice cut through the night. "She's eating his mind! Look at him!" Elias looked down at his hands. They were glowing faintly, the same silver white as Thylara's eyes. He felt different. Not empty. Fuller. Like he'd been given back something he didn't know he'd lost. His memories felt real again, substantial, valuable. For 15 years he'd been carrying them like weights. Now they felt like treasures. "Thylara," he said quietly. "What's happening?" "I do not know." Her voice was strained. "This should not be possible. The bond should not manifest physically. Unless—" She stopped, looked at him with something like wonder and fear mixed together. "Unless the consent is absolute. Unless the connection is pure? My people have legends of this. Ancient bonds formed between Urathi and other species when trust was complete and vulnerability was shared without reservation. But I have never witnessed it. I thought it was myth." The floating objects began to settle back down, the energy field dissipating slowly. But the damage was done. The crowd had seen. The videos were already uploading. Within minutes, every news network on the planet would have footage of an alien glowing with power while a human man stood transfixed beside her. Miyuki's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, face paling. "Elias, you need to see this." She held up the screen. News alert. Breaking story. The headline made his stomach drop. "Memory Eater attacks Sitka resident. Coast Guard establishing emergency protocols." The report showed footage from outside, him standing still while Thylara touched his forehead. The light, the levitating objects, his glowing hands, edited to look sinister, framed as assault. Evidence of the rumors everyone had been terrified of. "They think I'm attacking you," Thylara said, voice hollow. "They think I am the monster they feared." "You're not," Elias started, but she was standing now, moving toward the door. "I should go, before I cause more harm, before they come for me and hurt you in the process." "Wait!" He grabbed her arm without thinking. The crystalline surface was warm under his palm. "You didn't hurt me. You helped me. For the first time in 15 years, I feel like my memories mean something instead of just weighing me down." She looked at him, silver eyes dim with resignation. "Your kind will not see it that way." The sound of helicopters cut through the air. Military, news crews, the cavalry arriving to contain the threat. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. The 24 hours Price had promised were evaporating in real time, dissolved by fear and misunderstanding and viral video. Miyuki moved to the window, peering out. "There's a lot of people out there, Elias, and they do not look friendly." Outside, someone was setting up a barricade. Someone else had a rifle. The shed was surrounded, and inside it, a human and an alien stood together while the world decided they were enemies. "They will come for me soon," Thylara said quietly. "And when they do, you must let them take me. Do not defend me. Do not sacrifice yourself. You have been kind. That is more than I expected, more than I deserved." But Elias was thinking about his father, about the ocean, about respect and listening and the courage it took to stand your ground when everything was telling you to run. "No," he said, "that's not how this ends." The helicopters were landing now, lights blazing, spotlights turning night into day, voices on megaphones demanding surrender. And in the eye of the storm, Elias Ward made a choice that would change everything. He walked to the door, threw it open, and stepped out to face the crowd with Thylara standing behind him, tall and terrifying and trying desperately to save him by leaving. "Listen to me," he shouted into the chaos. "All of you! She's not attacking me, she's healing me!" But his voice was just one against hundreds, and the helicopters were too loud, and fear was already writing the ending they expected. The standoff lasted 3 hours. Coast Guard, local police, federal agents who'd arrived impossibly fast, like they'd been waiting for an excuse. They'd established a perimeter around the shed, negotiators with megaphones trying to talk Elias into surrendering the alien for everyone's safety. Inside, Thylara sat very still while Miyuki worked on her wounds, and Elias refused to answer his phone. Tom Brackens had called 11 times. Sarah, 3. His mother, who hadn't called him in 6 months, twice. "You should answer," Thylara said. "Tell them you are safe." "I am safe. They just don't believe it. Because they do not understand. Because the fear is old and rooted deep." She was quiet for a moment, crystalline fingers tracing patterns on the floor. "I should tell you why. Why the rumor exists. Why they think my kind devours consciousness?" Elias sat down across from her. Outside, spotlights swept across the shed walls, turning the interior into a stage. "I'm listening." 3 years ago, she began, voice soft and distant, "I lived on Urathal, my home. I was a keeper of echoes, one trained to preserve the emotional memories of the dying, so their feelings would not be lost when their bodies failed. It is sacred work, honored work, but there are rules." She paused, and Elias waited, giving her space. "There was a young Urathi named Velthanos. He was in great pain. Mental anguish so deep it was killing him. Slowly, the way your kind dies of broken hearts. He came to me and begged me to take his pain away, to use my gift to heal rather than preserve. But our culture forbids this. We believe that pain defines us, shapes us, makes us who we are. To remove it is to erase identity, to steal the self. But you did it anyway." "I did," her eyes dimmed, "because I believed that pain without witness is waste, that suffering serves no purpose if it only destroys. I listened to his anguish, and I did what I was trained to do, but in reverse. I did not preserve his pain. I absorbed it, took it from him, carried it myself so he could live free. What happened to him? He survived, thrived, became someone new. But the elders, they said I had violated the sacred law, that I had stolen part of his identity, made him less than whole. They exiled me, forbade any Urathi from sharing emotional resonance with me, condemned me to slow death by isolation." The pieces were clicking together in Elias's mind. "That's why you need connection. You're actually dying. Without someone to share emotional echoes with, you'll fade." "Yes, I came to Earth because I heard your species feels emotions with an intensity that could sustain me. But I arrived to discover the rumor, the mistranslation, the fear." Miyuki looked up from her examination, tablet in hand. "I've been researching. Found the original contact reports from 40 years ago. First Urathi delegation. There was a linguistic analysis session, and the translators misunderstood the concept. The Urathi explained they preserved emotional memories, that they held echoes of the dying. But the translator interpreted it as consumption, devouring. By the time anyone realized the mistake, the rumor had spread too far to correct." 40 years, Elias said. 40 years of fear, based on a mistranslation nobody bothered to verify. Fear is faster than truth, Taylora said again. Always. Miyuki's tablet buzzed with incoming data. She scrolled through it, frowning. There's something else. Medical scans from Urathi visitors over the years. They all show declining vitality. Your species is literally dying of loneliness because humans are too afraid to let you close enough to share emotional resonance. We are few now, Taylora confirmed. Once we were many. But as the galaxy closed its doors, we faded. Exile from Urathal is one thing. Exile from connection itself is extinction. The weight of it settled over the shed like snow, an entire species suffocating under humanity's misunderstanding, dying because fear moved faster than compassion. Elias's phone buzzed again. This time he looked. Text from Sarah. They're saying you're under mind control, that you need psychiatric evaluation. They're going to take her, Elias. Tonight. Please don't do anything stupid. He showed the message to Taylora. They're coming for you. I know. She stood, carefully avoiding the low ceiling. And I will go. Because if I resist, they will hurt you. And you have given me more than I had any right to expect. You listened. You shared. You let me hear echoes again, even briefly. That is gift enough. It's not enough, Elias said, anger flaring. You saved me. You gave my memories back their meaning. And they want to lock you up and study you like you're dangerous when you're literally dying of loneliness because we were too afraid to check if our fears were real. Miyuki was typing rapidly on her tablet. If I could prove the mistranslation, if I could show the medical data about Urathi decline, maybe I could convince the authorities that containment is wrong, that what she needs is connection, not confinement. There is not time, Taylora said gently, and you both have done more than enough. Please, let me go before you are hurt. The megaphone outside crackled to life. This is your final warning. Send out the Urathi or we will extract her by force. You have 5 minutes. Elias looked at Taylora, at Miyuki, at the shed that had been his sanctuary for 15 years, at the life he'd built out of grief and loneliness, and the careful art of not hoping for anything better. No, he said. Elias. Taylora's voice was pleading. Please. No, he said again, louder. You asked me who I was before the sadness. I was my father's son. And my father taught me that you don't let the current take what matters. You hold on, you fight, even when it's easier to let go. He walked to the door. Taylora moved to stop him, but Miyuki grabbed her arm. Let him do this! Elias threw open the shed door and stepped into the spotlight glare, hands raised, voice carrying across the frozen inlet. You want to know if I'm under mind control? You want to know if she's dangerous? Then listen to someone who's actually spent time with her instead of just being afraid. But even as he spoke, he saw them. News vans, federal vehicles, armed response teams. Sarah in the crowd, face twisted in anguish. Tom with his rifle. His neighbors, his community, everyone he'd lived among for 30 years, all convinced he was either a victim or a traitor. And behind him in the shed, an alien dying of loneliness, trying to save him by leaving, because that's what kindness looked like when the whole world had decided you were a monster. By dawn, Sitka had become a war zone of public opinion. National news crews were broadcasting live from the harbor. Social media was ablaze with theories, accusations, demands. Someone had leaked the shed's location precisely, and the crowd had swelled to hundreds. Signs appeared. Save Elias Ward. Quarantine the memory eater. First contact was a mistake. Federal agents established a command center in the harbor master's office. Dr. Chen had been escorted away for questioning about aiding and abetting. The 24-hour grace period was a distant memory. Lieutenant Commander Price looked exhausted when she returned to the megaphone. Mr. Ward, we have psychologists standing by to evaluate your mental state. We understand you may be experiencing coercion or manipulation, but we need you to understand that the entity you are protecting poses a potential threat to civilian safety. Please, let us help you." Elias sat on the shed floor beside Tylara, who had gone silent hours ago. The glowing had stopped. The power had receded. She looked smaller somehow, diminished, like she was already starting to fade. "They think I broke you," she whispered. "They think you are victim." "I know what I am," Elias said, but the words felt hollow. His phone had become a weapon of psychological warfare. Messages poured in, his mother begging him to come home, former co-workers calling him selfish, strangers sending death threats, and Sarah over and over, "Please, let her go, save yourself." The worst part was understanding why. From the outside it looked exactly like the rumors described: alien with forbidden power, isolated human, behavior change, resistance to rescue. Every element of a mind control scenario was present except the actual mind control. A new voice came through the megaphone. Male. Authoritative. "This is Special Agent Morrison, CDC Emergency Response. Mr. Ward, we have evidence suggesting exposure to unknown biochemical agents during your contact with the Urathi subject. You require immediate medical evaluation. We're coming in. Please do not resist." "They are coming," Tylara said. "Not a question, a fact. And I will not let them harm you for my sake." She stood. The shed shook slightly under her weight. "I am going out. I will surrender. You will tell them I coerced you, that you had no choice. They will treat you as victim, and you will live your life. That's a lie. It is the lie that saves you." She moved toward the door. Elias scrambled to his feet, putting himself between her and the exit. "You can't. They'll lock you up, study you, keep you isolated. You'll die." "I am already dying, have been since exile. This simply speeds the inevitable." Her voice was calm, resigned, like she'd made peace with it long ago. "But you have life ahead." Sarah was right. You are opening again. Feeling again. Do not waste that gift on dying with me. What if I don't want to be saved if it means abandoning you? She looked at him with infinite sadness. Then you do not understand the gift you gave me. For 3 years, I heard nothing, felt nothing, existed in silence so complete it was like being erased one moment at a time. Then you, a human who owed me nothing, who had every reason to fear me, who was drowning in his own pain, you listened, you shared. You gave me echoes again, even briefly. You reminded me what it feels like to matter to someone. You do matter. To you, yes. But your world sees monster, and I will not let their fear destroy you." She gently moved him aside. Her strength absolute, but her touch careful. "Thank you, Elias Ward, for seeing person where everyone saw threat, for being brave when brave was dangerous, for teaching me that even at the end, connection is possible." She opened the door, stepped into the spotlight, 3 meters of crystalline alien, hands raised, posture submissive, trying to look as non-threatening as possible when there was no way to make her size and her power and her otherness anything but terrifying to those who'd already decided she was dangerous. "I surrender," she called out, voice carrying across the frozen inlet. "The human is innocent. I coerced his cooperation. Please, let him go." Elias stood in the doorway, watching it happen, watching her lie to save him, watching tactical teams approach with weapons drawn and restraints designed for something twice human size, watching his neighbors cheer like they'd won a victory instead of participating in an execution by isolation. And Sarah was there, at the edge of the crowd, and she was crying. Not relief, not joy, something that looked almost like understanding, like she'd finally seen what Elias had been trying to show her 3 years ago, that sometimes caring was just choosing not to look away when looking away would be easier. An agent stepped forward with restraints. Tylara knelt to make it easier. She was still trying to protect them, Even now, even as they took away the one thing she needed to survive. Elias felt something break inside him, not the wall he'd built after his father died. Something deeper. The part that had learned to accept loss. The part that had made peace with letting the current take what it wanted. "No!" He ran forward, past the agents, past the weapons, and threw himself between them and Thalara. "You don't get to decide for me! Either of you!" Hands grabbed him, pulled him back. He fought them. "She's dying. Don't you understand? She needs connection to survive, and you're sentencing her to death by isolation because you're too afraid to verify if your fears are even real." "Mr. Ward, calm down." Agent Morrison's voice, clinical, detached. "We'll get you help." "I don't need help. She does." He was shouting now, desperate. 3 years. She's been exiled for 3 years. She came here because she was dying, and we're killing her because we believed a rumor from 40 years ago that was wrong from the start. But they weren't listening. Nobody was listening. They were processing Thalara into custody, loading her into a transport vehicle designed for hazardous materials. She looked back at him once, silver eyes dim, accepting, grateful he'd tried, and Elias Ward, who'd spent 15 years being careful, being small, being safe, broke. He pulled free from the agents and ran, not away, toward, following the transport vehicle as it pulled away from the harbor, running through snow and ice, falling, getting up, running again, screaming her name like it mattered, like someone might still listen, like the world could change its mind if he just refused to give up. "Don't leave me alone again." The words tore out of him, raw and desperate and true. Not about her, about him, about 15 years of isolation that he'd chosen, and one night of connection he hadn't, about finally mattering to someone and having them taken away, about being heard and then forced back into silence. The transport didn't stop, but ahead, through the windshield, he saw Thalara turn, saw her press one crystalline hand against the glass, saw her mouth form words he couldn't hear but understood anyway. "I'm sorry, thank you, Lev." And then the vehicle was gone, and Elias was on his knees in the snow, and Sitka's sunrise was breaking over the inlet like the world hadn't just ended for 2 people who dared to connect across the gap of fear. They found him on the dock 2 hours later, still kneeling, hypothermic, staring at the water like it might give him answers. Sarah and Miyuki pulled him up between them, half-carried him to Miyuki's clinic, wrapped him in blankets he couldn't feel, and waited for him to come back from wherever he'd gone. "She's at the federal facility 30 miles north," Miyuki said quietly. "Quarantine protocols. No visitors, no communication. They're treating her like a biological hazard." Elias stared at his hands. They'd stopped glowing hours ago, but he could still feel it. The connection. The echo of her presence. Fading slowly, like a song playing in another room that was getting farther away with each passing minute. "I failed her," he said. "No." Sarah sat down across from him, and for the first time in 3 years, he really looked at her. She'd been crying, eyes red, makeup ruined. "I failed you. For 3 years, I kept asking you to open up, but I never actually listened. I just waited for my turn to talk, to fix, to solve. I never just heard you." "Sarah." "She did in one night what I couldn't do in 3 years." Sarah's voice cracked. "She asked who you were before the sadness. And you told her. And I watched you cry for the first time ever. And I realized that all this time, you weren't closed. You just needed someone who knew how to ask." Miyuki was at her computer typing rapidly. "The translation error has been documented. I've got linguistic analysis from the original contact. The Urathi word for preserve and consume are nearly identical. Single phoneme difference. 40 years of fear because translators didn't double-check their work." "Will anyone care?" Elias's voice was hollow. "They will if we make them care." Miyuki pulled up video files. "I recorded everything, the ritual, the manifestation. Your conversation, all of it. And I've been analyzing the energy readings from when the power activated. It's not destructive, it's protective. Empathetic resonance, she called it. The field was keeping you safe, not attacking anyone. They won't believe it, Elias said. They saw what they expected to see. Monster. Victim. Story over. Then we change the story. Sarah's voice was fierce. We show them what actually happened. What she actually is. We make them see person instead of threat. Elias looked at them both. Why? Why do you care? Because you do, Sarah said simply. And because I spent 3 years being angry that you wouldn't let me in, and now I'm watching you fight to save someone who did let you in, and I finally understand. Love isn't about fixing people. It's about being present when they need someone to just exist beside them. Miyuki's phone rang. She answered, listened, face tightening. They're moving her. Tomorrow morning. Military research facility, classified location. Once she's there, we'll never reach her. How long can she survive in isolation? Sarah asked. Based on the decline rates I've seen in historical data? Miyuki checked her notes. Days, maybe a week. Urathi physiology requires regular emotional resonance. It's not metaphorical, it's biochemical. They literally need connection to generate the compounds that keep them alive. Elias stood up. The blanket fell away. He was still cold, still exhausted, still broken, but something in him had shifted. The current had tried to take her, and he'd let it happen. Let her go to save him. Let her choose sacrifice because he'd spent 15 years believing that's what strength looked like. But his father hadn't taught him to let the current win. He'd taught him to respect its power and fight anyway, to hold on to what mattered, even when your hands were tired and the water was cold, and everyone told you it wasn't worth it. I need to reach her, he said. They won't let you, Miyuki started. I don't need permission. She once asked if she could listen to my memories. Now I need her to hear me, really hear me, because I spent 15 years alone, and she gave me connection, and I'll be damned if I let her die alone after teaching me what living feels like. How? Sarah asked. They've got her in containment. Elias thought about the power, the manifestation, the way the bond had activated when trust was complete and vulnerability was shared. Thalara had said it was ancient, legendary, thought to be myth. She needs emotional resonance to survive, he said slowly. She needs to feel echoes, to know she's not alone. What if I could give her that? What if everyone could? Miyuki leaned forward. You want to recreate the bond? Publicly? I want her to do what she did to me, but in reverse. I want her to share her memories with the people here. Let them feel what it's like to be her, to be exiled, to be dying of loneliness while everyone fears you, to find one person who listens and have them taken away. That's insane, Sarah said. She's in federal custody. They took her from the harbor. They can bring her back to it. Elias pulled out his phone, started texting. Everyone he knew, every number in his contact list. If enough people show up, if enough people demand to see the truth instead of just believing the fear, if we can make them understand that what they're doing is execution, not protection. They'll say no, Miyuki warned. Then we make them say yes. Elias kept typing. Sitka watched them take her. Sitka can demand they bring her back. We're not asking permission. We're creating a situation they can't ignore. Sarah stood up, pulled out her own phone. I'll call the news stations. If they want a story, they'll get one. But it'll be the real story, not the one they've been broadcasting. Miyuki nodded. I'll compile the medical data, linguistic analysis, everything that proves she's not dangerous. She's endangered. They worked through the afternoon, building a case, spreading the word, turning fear into curiosity and curiosity into demand. The video of the ritual went viral, not as evidence of attack, but as documentation of connection. Miyuki's analysis spread through scientific communities. Linguists confirmed the translation error. Xenobiologists reviewed the Urathi decline data. By evening, the harbor was filling again, but this time, not with fear, with questions, with people who wanted to understand instead of just react. Tom Brackens was there, looking uncomfortable. "Your message said she's dying. That true?" "Yes," Elias said. "Isolation kills them, slowly. And we're doing it on purpose because we believed a rumor nobody bothered to verify." Tom was quiet for a long moment. "My cousin, the one who heard the story, he got it third-hand from someone who didn't actually witness anything. We just passed it along because it sounded true." He looked sick. "We're killing her based on gossip." More people were arriving, hundreds, then thousands. Sitka coming together, not in fear, but in something else, something that looked almost like shame. Price appeared, looking haggard. "What is this, Ward? Ed, this is your chance to do the right thing," Elias said. "Bring her back. Let her tell her story. Let people see her truth. And if after that they still think she's dangerous, then you can take her. But they deserve to know what they're actually afraid of." Price looked at the growing crowd, at the cameras, at the choice she was being forced to make. "This is highly irregular. Yao is executing someone for being lonely." She pulled out her radio, made the call, and 30 minutes later, the transport vehicle returned, and Thayalara emerged, restrained but alive, dim but present, and saw the crowd that had condemned her now, waiting to listen. She looked at Elias, confused, hopeful, terrified. He walked through the crowd to stand before her. "You listen to me. Now let them hear you. Let them feel what you feel. Let them understand what we've done." "They will not want my memories," she whispered. "My pain." "Then let them choose," Elias said. "The way you let me choose. With permission. With consent. With the understanding that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone see who you really are." Thayalara looked at the crowd, at Sitka, at the faces of people who'd feared her, and people who'd condemned her, and people who'd taken her away. And then she nodded. "I will share," she said, voice carrying across the frozen harbor, "if you will listen." And in the growing darkness, with the whole town watching, an alien and a human prepared to bridge the gap that fear had built with the only tool that ever worked. Truth. The restraints came off slowly, carefully, agents watching for any sign of threat. Thayalara stood in the center of the harbor, surrounded by thousands of humans, any one of whom could panic and restart the fear. Her hands were shaking, not from cold, from the enormity of what Elias was asking. "I do not know if this will work," she said quietly. "The ritual is meant for individuals. To share with many at once, I must amplify the resonance. It will be overwhelming. For all of us." "Will it hurt them?" Elias asked. "No, but they will feel everything I feel. My exile, my desperation, my fear, my hope, emotions without filter. It may be more than they expect." "Good," Elias said. "Let them feel it. Let them know you." Miyuki had set up recording equipment. News cameras were live streaming to millions. This wouldn't just change Sitka. It would change how humanity understood the Urathi forever, for better or worse. Thayalara knelt, making herself smaller, less intimidating. Her crystalline skin had dulled since yesterday, the colors muted, dying. She pressed both palms flat against the frozen ground of the harbor and closed her eyes. "If you wish to feel," she called out, voice resonant and clear, "then be still, be open, be willing to understand that different is not dangerous. It is simply other. This will not hurt you, but it will change you. All truth does." The harbor went silent, thousands holding their breath, and Thayalara released the echo. It started as pressure, a weight in the chest, then warmth spreading outward from the heart. And then, overwhelming and impossible. They felt her. All of her. 3 years of isolation compressed into moments. The hollow agony of being cut off from her kind. The slow fade of identity as days passed without emotional resonance. The desperate journey to Earth, hope dying with every light year that brought her closer to a species that feared what she was. People gasped, some cried out, but nobody ran. They stood frozen, experiencing an alien's loneliness from the inside, and understanding for the first time that pain was universal even when the biology wasn't. The memory shifted. Tylara crash landing in Sitka, terror, desperation, injuries, and then a human approaching. Small, ordinary, carrying a toolbox, like it was a weapon of kindness. Speaking words she didn't understand, but feeling his intention clear as starlight. Help, not harm. The crowd felt Elias through her eyes, felt his own sadness resonating with hers, felt the moment she realized they were the same, both exiled, both lonely, both drowning in isolation and trying desperately not to show it. They felt her surprise when he asked her name, her wonder when he shared his pain, her joy, desperate and overwhelming, when he invited her to listen to his memories. The first emotional echo she'd experienced in 3 years. The first time she'd felt alive instead of just existing. And they felt what happened next. The bond forming, power awakening, ancient connection manifesting because a human had trusted her completely and she had trusted him back. 2 broken people creating something whole through nothing more than shared vulnerability. Then the fear, the misunderstanding, the transport vehicle taking her away. The certainty that she would die alone, but gratitude that she'd felt connection one last time before the end. And the image of Elias running through snow, screaming for her not to leave him alone. The words that broke her heart, because she wanted nothing more than to stay but couldn't bear to destroy him in the process. The emotion crashed through the crowd like a wave. Sarah was sobbing openly. Tom Brackens had fallen to his knees. Lieutenant Commander Price had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Thousands of people experiencing the consequences of their fear from the perspective of the person they'd feared. She wasn't a monster. She was lonely. She wasn't dangerous. She was dying. She was another. She was just someone trying to survive in a galaxy that had decided she was too frightening to approach. The resonance built. Tylara's skin began to glow again, brighter this time. Colors cascading across her surface like northern lights made solid. The energy field expanded, not threatening, but embracing, protective, empathetic, holding everyone in the harbor in a moment of shared understanding. People reached out to each other, strangers holding hands, neighbors embracing, the barrier between human and alien dissolving under the weight of comprehension. They'd hurt her, not through malice, through ignorance, through fear, through choosing comfort over curiosity, but they could choose differently now. An agent lowered his weapon. "She's just lonely," he whispered, voice awed. "That's all. She's just lonely." Sarah pushed through the crowd to reach Elias. "I felt her. I felt what you gave her. Connection, purpose, hope. You weren't being controlled. You were being kind when kind was radical." More people were moving now, toward Tylara instead of away, wanting to understand instead of condemn. The circle around her tightened, but not with threat, with something that looked almost like protection, like Sitka had decided collectively that they'd made a mistake and were prepared to defend her from anyone who still didn't understand. But the effort was destroying her. The glow flickered. Tylara's breathing became labored. 3 years of decline couldn't be reversed in minutes, and sharing emotional resonance with thousands at once was burning through what little life force she had left. The field wavered. "She's collapsing," Miyuki shouted. "The resonance is too much." Tylara's eyes met Elias's across the crowd. Apologetic, grateful, accepting. She'd given them truth. That was enough. If this was how she ended, at least she'd mattered. At least someone had heard her. At least she'd died connected instead of alone. No. Elias pushed through people, running, desperate. Not like this. You don't get to give up after finally making them understand. He reached her as she started to fall, caught her hand. Her skin was hot, power, uncontrolled, dangerous. But he held on anyway because letting go would be easier, and easy had never saved anyone who mattered. The moment they touched, something changed. The field stabilized. The wild energy found focus. Taylor's eyes went wide with shock as human stubbornness met alien desperation and created something neither expected. Balance. The glow intensified but stopped flickering. The crowd felt it, a surge of emotion that was both human and Urathi, both grief and hope, both ending and beginning. Elias was pouring everything he had into her through the touch, his memories, his pain, his joy at being heard, his refusal to let her fade, his absolute conviction that she deserved to exist, to be seen, to be understood, and it was enough. The field pulsed once, brilliant and beautiful, and then contracted inward, settling into Thaelara, like she was breathing after nearly drowning. Color returned to her skin. Her breathing steadied, her eyes brightened to full silver. She looked at Elias, stunned. You gave me your echo, your entire emotional resonance. That should have left you empty. I'm still here, he said. I'm okay. I'm more than okay. And it was true. Sharing hadn't diminished him. It had completed him. Connection didn't deplete. It multiplied. Stay with me? Thaelara whispered, voice small despite her size. Always, Elias said, and meant it with everything he was. Around them, Sitka erupted in something between cheering and crying. They'd witnessed transformation. Not just of an alien being saved from death, but of a community choosing understanding over fear, of humans being brave enough to feel what someone else felt and letting it change them. Price was on her radio, voice shaking. Stand down. All units, stand down. No threat detected. Repeat. No threat detected. And in the center of it all, a fisherman and an alien stood together in the snow, while the whole world learned that sometimes the most human thing you could do was refuse to let loneliness win. 3 weeks later, Elias stood at the harbor dock watching dawn break over Sitka, and for the first time in 15 years, the sunrise looked like a beginning instead of another day to survive. The fishing shed had been expanded, reinforced. Thaelara lived there now, not as a refugee or a prisoner, but as someone who'd chosen Sitka the same way Sitka had finally chosen her. The town had transformed around the choice. What had been a small Alaskan fishing community became the first place on Earth where humans and Urathi lived together openly. Proof that fear could be overcome when people were brave enough to try. Elias still fished, still mended nets, but now he did it with purpose instead of habit, knowing that Thaelara would be there when he returned, ready to share the day's echoes, to listen to his thoughts, to remind him that he mattered in ways that went beyond function. She emerged from the shed now, moving carefully through a doorway that had been widened to accommodate her size. Her skin gleamed in the early light, colors bright and alive, healthy in a way they hadn't been when she'd crashed here. Connection had saved her. Human stubbornness and empathy had given her what her own people had denied. "Good morning," she said, voice warm. "Morning." Elias smiled. "Sleep okay?" "I do not sleep as your kind does, but I rested. The town's emotional resonance is strong, peaceful. I hear contentment, hope. It sustains me." She moved to stand beside him, looking out over the water. "Do you still think of your father? Every day. But it doesn't hurt the same way anymore. You helped me understand that grief isn't forgetting. It's remembering without drowning." Down the dock, Sarah approached with coffee for both of them. She'd been coming by most mornings lately, rebuilding friendship from the ruins of failed romance. She'd started volunteering at the community center Miyuki had established, teaching people about Urathi culture, about emotional resonance, about the importance of checking fear against fact before acting on it. "Morning, you two." Sarah handed over the coffees. "Big day today. The delegation arrives at noon." Elias had almost forgotten. 3 weeks ago, while Sitka was deciding whether Thylara was monster or miracle, word had reached Urathal about what had happened, about a human town that had overcome fear, about an exiled Urathi finding sanctuary among the species everyone thought was too emotionally volatile to approach safely. A ship was coming. Urathi elders, representatives, coming to see if the rumors were true, if humans really could provide what their species needed, if exile could end, not through return, but through finding home elsewhere. "Are you nervous?" Elias asked Thylara. "Terrified," she admitted. "They exiled me for breaking sacred law, for using my gift to heal instead of preserve. But you showed me I was right. That pain without witness is waste. That connection matters more than tradition. I do not know if they will understand." "Then we make them understand," Sarah said firmly. "Same way Sitka learned, by feeling it instead of just hearing about it." Tom Brackens walked past, raising a hand in greeting. He'd become Thylara's most unlikely advocate, using his network of fishermen to spread the truth about Urathi throughout Alaska and beyond. Guilt, he'd said, was a hell of a motivator. He'd been wrong about her, and he was determined to make sure others didn't make the same mistake. Miyuki appeared next, tablet in hand, always documenting. Her paper on interspecies empathetic bonding had been published in 3 major journals. Universities wanted her to speak, governments wanted her to advise. She'd become the foremost expert on human-Urathi relations simply by being willing to observe without prejudice. "Vitals are good," she said, checking her readings on Thylara. "Resonance patterns stable. Color saturation optimal. You're healthier than any Urathi on record in the last decade. Turns out humans are really good at providing emotional connection when we stop being afraid of it." "Your species feels with intensity that most find overwhelming," Thylara said. "But I find it beautiful. You love fiercely, grieve deeply, hope desperately. It is exhausting and exhilarating, and exactly what my kind needs to survive." The morning passed in familiar routine. Elias worked on his nets. Thylara sat nearby, listening to the town's emotional echoes, occasionally sharing observations about what she heard. People stopped by, curious tourists, scientists, other Urathi who'd heard about Sitka and made pilgrimage. By noon, the harbor was crowded again, but this time with anticipation instead of fear. The Urathi ship descended slowly, gracefully, landing in the same inlet where Thylara had crashed 3 weeks ago. The contrast was deliberate. Accident versus intention, exile versus invitation. 5 Urathi emerged. Massive, crystalline, intimidating. The crowd held its ground, remembering what they'd learned, choosing understanding over instinct. The eldest approached Thylara, 4 meters tall, colors deep and ancient. "You were exiled for using your gift improperly," she said, voice resonant with centuries. "You violated sacred law." "I did," Thylara replied, not backing down. "And I would do it again, because pain without purpose is cruelty, because healing matters, because connection is not theft. It is gift." "And these humans taught you this?" "These humans lived it." Thylara gestured to Elias, to Sarah, to the crowd. "This one was dying of grief. I helped him carry it. It did not erase who he was, it completed who he could become." "Your law is wrong, Elder. Kindly meant, but wrong. And this species proved it." The Elder studied Elias with those massive, reflective eyes. "You allowed her to hear your pain." "I did," Elias said. "And it saved my life. Not because she took the pain away, because she witnessed it, made it matter, gave it meaning. And in return? In return, I witnessed hers, and learned that being human means choosing connection even when connection is terrifying. It means seeing person where others see monster. It means refusing to let fear write the ending when courage is an option." The elder was quiet for a long time. Then she knelt, making herself level with Elias, and extended one massive hand. "May I hear your echo?" "With permission, with understanding that this is gift, not theft." Elias took her hand, felt the familiar warmth, the pressure, the sense of being truly heard. Around them, other Urathi were approaching other humans, asking permission, sharing resonance, discovering what Thylara had found, that humans weren't too volatile. They were exactly volatile enough. Their intensity wasn't weakness, it was strength. Connection multiplied. The harbor filled with light as dozens of bonds formed simultaneously, Urathi glowing with renewed life. Humans experiencing the profound peace of being completely understood. Two species learning to bridge the gap that fear had made seem uncrossable. The elder released Elias's hand, eyes bright with wonder and something that looked almost like tears. "We were wrong. About the exile. About the law. About humans." She turned to Thylara. "You are no longer cast out. Return home. Teach us what you have learned." Thylara looked at the elder, at the ship, at Urathal waiting in the stars, at everything she'd been exiled from. Then she looked at Elias, at the fishing shed, at Sitka spread out around the harbor, at the community that had learned to see her, at the human who'd refused to let her die alone, at the life she'd built from the ruins of exile. "I am home," she said simply. "This is where I choose to stay." The elder inclined her head. "Then we will send others, those in exile, those seeking connection, those willing to learn from your example. If humans can provide what we need, then perhaps Earth becomes not refuge, but haven, not ending, but beginning." As the Urathi ship prepared to depart, carrying news that would change galactic politics forever, Elias and Thylara stood together at the dock. Two exiles who'd found each other. Two species learning that different wasn't dangerous. Just different. And that sometimes the bravest thing anyone could do was extend a hand across the gap and say the simplest, most radical thing possible. "I see you. I hear you. You matter." "Do you still hear my sadness?" Elias asked quietly. Thylara smiled, an expression she'd learned from him. "Yes, but now I also hear your joy, your hope, your love for this strange little town and the strange large alien who crashed into it. You are whole now, scarred but complete. It is beautiful song." "Will others come? Other Urathi?" "Yes, many. Sitka will become bridge. First place where human and Urathi learned to exist, not just peacefully but joyfully. Your town will be remembered." "Good," Elias said. "Let them come. Let them learn what we learned. That fear is fast, but truth is permanent. That walls protect nothing worth keeping. That the best thing humanity ever did was figure out how to be vulnerable on purpose." Above them, the Urathi ship vanished into clouds. Below them, Sitka continued its day, transformed but still itself. And between them, Elias and Thylara stood in perfect understanding. She had come to Earth dying, expecting rejection, prepared for the end. He had spent 15 years dying, expecting nothing, prepared for isolation. Both had been wrong. Both had been saved. Not through violence, not through conquest, not through humanity being stronger or smarter or more powerful. Through the one thing humans had always excelled at, even when it terrified them, even when it cost everything, even when the whole world said it was stupid, choosing to care anyway, choosing connection over safety, choosing to see someone who needed help and saying the words that changed everything. "You're hurt. I can help." And in a galaxy that thought humans were too dangerous to trust, too volatile to approach, too emotional to take seriously, that simple act of stubborn compassion became the thing that saved two species and proved once and for all that humanity's greatest strength was never violence. It was the refusal to let anyone suffer alone. Even when alone would be so much easier. Even when caring cost everything. even when the person who needed help was 3 meters tall, crystalline, and came from a species everyone feared. Especially then, because that's what being human meant, and the whole galaxy was finally starting to understand. In the end, Elias and Thaylara reminded us of a truth humans keep rediscovering the hard way. We survive storms with grit, but we become alive the moment someone finally listens. Connection isn't a luxury in this universe, it's the only technology that has ever reliably rewritten destiny. Even when destiny arrives 3 meters tall and sparkling like a depressed chandelier, and maybe that's the quiet cosmic joke of it all. We keep assuming the dangerous thing is the alien, when the real threat has always been our own fear of being known. Now I want to ask you, what would you risk if understanding someone meant letting them glimpse the parts of you you've spent years hiding? Where in your life have you mistaken fear for truth and paid the price? And when was the last time you offered someone the thing every species in this galaxy seems to need? Permission to be heard? If you made it here without emotionally short-circuiting, write echo in the comments so I know you felt the resonance. Tell me your city so we can map this little human Urathi alliance across Earth. And of course, subscribe, like, hype, share this story with someone who might need it, and watch the next video that just appeared on your screen. After all, connections only grow when we keep showing up.